The fabulous Hudson Hornet. An icon of early stock car racing, many at first glance can look at the car and say what it is, but very few know of its origins. How did a small motor company like Hudson go from completely irrelevant to winning over 70 cup races to not existing in a span of 5 years? To understand, you have to look at the story of the Hudson Hornet. To start, we have to go all the way back before NASCAR, before World War II, and before the Great War. 1909. The Hudson Motor Company founder, Joseph L. Hudson, has established his entrepreneurial investment with 8 other Detroit businessmen. Over the next quarter century, they attempt to build their car empire, and by post-World War II, they were one of the many iconic Detroit car brands. For their 1951 production year, they made a new car, their most innovative one ever, the Hudson Hornet. In its first generation, it was designed with a lower floor pan, a step-down design, and a chassis that kept the center of gravity much lower in the vehicle. It tucked the rear down so far that the center of gravity was the lowest out of any production car released at that point. The Hornet's power supply would also be at the company's forefront of engineering. Instead of the bulky V8 assembly, the car carried an inline 6-cylinder power source, titled H145. They soon provided in late 1951 a Twin H, which was the addition of a twin one-barrel carburetor. Adding it would have an additional cost of $85.60, equivalent to $975 in today's currency. The combination therefore allowed for 145 horsepower to be put out for performance. And in the 1951 season, the Hudson Hornet made its debut in stock car racing. February 11th, 1951. The Daytona Beach and Road Course, where Tim Flock sits on the pole. In 6th, however, is the 6-car Marshall Teague. He is driving a self-owned vehicle, with the sponsor labeled on the door as the fabulous Hudson Hornet. He would go on to win this race, making the fabulous car 1-0 in competition. The next race did not fare so well, as the Hudson would finish 3rd because of the Plymouth Lee Petty and the winner Curtis Turner in his Nash Motor Co. car. On a weird accomplishment for this race, Hudson Motor Company did possess the oldest car in the field. Buddy Helms was driving in the number 97, which was a 1946 model Hudson. While it wasn't a Hornet variation, it still finished 13th. The next time the Hornet ran was during a race at Carroll Speedway in California. Teague again started 2nd and led every lap, winning his 2nd race of the year. Teague was beginning to realize something about this car. The low center of gravity made it lethal on the short tracks, and coupled with its slightly lower horsepower, prevented as much wheel spin on the dirt, proving Teague well as the car was now 2-1. Race 6 in 1951 was again won by Teague, and this time on a 1-mile dirt track in Arizona. In Martinsville, the Hornet experienced its first calamity. It crashed. The incident happened whilst the car was leading the race. And although the situation seemed dire, the car was quickly repaired, and Teague dominated the next race at Canfield Speedway. The next time Teague ran, he fell out early due to a listed injury as a reason for DNF. The reason behind this was as Teague was racing, he was involved in the first caution, and was slammed into. The impact didn't damage the car enough to DNF it, but it did do enough damage to his leg to want him to step out of the race. Teague got another 3rd at the next race, and didn't win again until the Grand Rapids Speedrome race. The Hornet got into a losing streak as the Southern 500 approached. Herb Thomas, also driving a car owned by himself, ran another fabulous Hudson Hornet. This was the first time that 2 of the fabulous Hudson Hornets were running an event. And Thomas would come along after 6.5 hours of racing and win the 2nd Southern 500. Thomas ran the car in the next race as well, but crashed. Teague and Thomas came back for the next race at Longhorn, with Herb winning again. He then won the next race before DNFing at Wilson Speedway. The car finished out the year with a record 10-14, winning 10 of the 24 races it ran. It was a fairly impressive feat, but it was just the beginning for the car that was about to get an upgrade. The tandem came back for 1952 and finished 1-2 at the Daytona Beach Road Course. They led every lap, showing off the new twin carburetor option that was released. They finished 1-2 again at Jacksonville, and Thomas won Wilkesboro. While not a fabulous Hudson Hornet, Buck Baker won with one, owned by B.A. Pless and the Charlotte Hudson Co. Buck's win, though, was not the first time the Hornet had won without the fabulous branding on it. Dick Rathman won a race before that in the Hornet. Tim Flock had won the opening race of the year as well with the Hudson Hornet. And going forward, the car would win 5 races in a row. Dick Rathman claimed 3 in a row in that time, and Herb bookended the other two. Soon Tim Flock and Herb started dominating the series as others swapped to the Hudson Hornet. And as the popularity of it increased, its win record in the Cup Series rose to an astonishing 39 wins and only 36 losses in 2 years. It carried Herb to his 1951 title, and now Tim Flock to his 1952 Drivers' Championship. In 1953, it was nothing short of routine, another 22 wins, and a second title for Herb Thomas. In 1954, the car brand lost its first driver's title to Lee Petty, but won another manufacturer's championship. It was the third in a row, and since the award's inception in 1952, Hudson was the only one to have claimed it so far. But change was on the horizon for the automaker, and it wasn't in a good way. In 1955, the Hornet entered its second generation, to which it faced its greatest regression. It had to do with what happened to the motor company itself. Hudson was never a large company. In some ways, their waves of success was accidental. They never planned to design one of the greatest short track and dirt racing stock cars ever. They were simply trying to survive in a market dominated by Ford and Chevy. Therefore, on May 1st, 1954, Hudson, along with Nash Kelvinator, merged to create the American Motor Corporation, AMC for short. In turn, the Hornet, as mentioned before, entered its second generation. The Hornet was offered a V8 option for the first time, and the step-down design that helped the car in the short tracks was drastically handicapped. With that, Hudson only won one race in 1955, at Palm Beach Speedway. Herb Thomas did it in the previous year's model, and it marked the last time that the Hornet sat in victory lane. The last time the Hornet even raced in Cup was in 1956 at Langhorne Speedway, by Benny DeRossier. The actual production car itself didn't make it much longer, the last Hudson being made on June 25th, 1957. AMC as a company did not fare very well, as most of its existence was playing second fiddle to the big three Detroit manufacturers. American Motors Corporation eventually shut down in 1988. "70 years later, and the legacy of the Hudson Hornet can be seen not on the racetrack or in the garage, but in media and folklore about the sport. The dominance that the Hudson Hornet had for its small influence in short time is unprecedented and unlikely to happen again. It is a car that has transcended its own era and translated into the 2006 Pixar film franchise Cars. The character Doc Hudson, voiced by the late Paul Newman, is heavily based off the legendary vehicle. And this film alone opened up the legacy to a new generation. A generation that will forever remember the fabulous Hudson Hornet.